Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. It's Monday, and that means it's time for another conversation with the Detroit Documenters. The Detroit Documenters play a crucial role in improving our access to public information because they attend a range of public meetings. Documenters attended the first Detroit Reparations Task Force meeting in 2023. That group was formed to look at how Detroit can address historical discrimination that Black residents have faced. Now, the task force is preparing a June report for the city council, and they want input from residents. The tension here is that this report could mark the end of the task force, and that has some people concerned. They argue addressing historic harm and injustice caused by the city of Detroit should be an ongoing practice. Metro producer Jack Philbrandt spoke with Detroit documenter Sherry Smith and coordinator Linnell Herndon about the Detroit Reparations Task Force. Smith interviewed Jason Larsosa, a member of the task force, for Outlier Media. They began by speaking about what a task force is.
So a task force is like a group of influencers for the government, right? So they just get a specific issue that they want to concentrate or focus on. So Detroit City Council comes up with a few task forces. You might be familiar with like the Green Task Force, which started in like 2007. They have an immigration task force. And so most recently they've stood up, I think in 2023, the Reparations Task Force. So the Reparations Task Force is responsible for developing recommendations for housing and economic programs to address historical discrimination against Black Detroiters.
Sherry, Black communities have been fighting for and having conversations about reparations for a long time. And as a country, we have not addressed slavery and continued systemic racism. How is Detroit trying to address this?
Of course, there are a lot of conversations about reparations, ballot initiatives to make this current task force a possibility in the first place, and then actually, convening a group of folks to fully address as much as possible in the time they were given, looking at the harms that were perpetuated against Black Americans in the city of Detroit, not necessarily on a national scale, but things that happened here in Detroit that a lot of people are not aware of, and what residents wanted to see as repairs to those harms. So having those conversations and compiling this group to set up a report in hopes, which will be kind of a stoplight on a longer conversation that is going to need to be had before real solutions come to play.
What has the task force been tasked with and assigned to do, and what are some of the conversations that they're having when it comes to putting their report together?
So there's been a lot of conversations. They've also met with students from universities. I know last year they were doing tours with community groups and community members to different historical sites in the city of Detroit where harms took place. Some of the redlined areas. I know they went to the Burwood Wall and just talked about the camps and a lot of the policy legislation that caused African Americans not to be able to build generational wealth in this city. A lot of the issues with even just work in this city, places like Paradise Valley and Hastings Street, and just a lot of the different things that Black Americans in this city suffered, that the task force has spent a lot of time with different groups to go over that history, to take time in to look at like the long-term impacts of studies, history, and working with universities to kind of compile. There was also a survey that went out to all of the city residents to gain their ideas on what do you think reparations should be in the city of Detroit. And, of course, their monthly meetings that they've been having publicly for about a year and a half, maybe a little bit longer.
Linnell, what is the task force trying to do right now? Can you talk about how community members can get involved and give their input to the work that the Detroit Reparations Task Force is doing?
Definitely. So there is, they have a report due to City Council at the end of June, and they're really trying to get community members to weigh in on some of these topics that Sherry was talking about when it comes to reparations, like who's eligible for these reparations? How do you prove you're eligible for these reparations? Who's going to fund these reparations? Right? What does the program look like? How are the reparations distributed? Do we want cash? Do we want free houses? Like, what ideas do you have? You can definitely access the Reparations Task Force. So there's so many ways you can contact them, to be honest. First of all, you could just Google Detroit Reparations Task Force and it will take you right to their webpage, which has all of their information. You can email. I want to say it's reparations@detroitmi.gov to reach them. But also, if you go to their webpage, you can click right into, they have an inquiry form. You can send a specific inquiry to them. You can go to their meetings. They hold meetings the second Saturday of the month. I want to shout out soapboxdetroit.com, SOAPBOX Detroit.com. It is a comprehensive directory of all the city's agencies, councils, commissions, task forces, right? They're all broken down for you. Anybody can access that and kind of find out when they're meeting. If you make a free account on this website, you can contact them directly. It's so simple to just click into whatever agency you're into, and there's a message that you can send right to their leadership, and so they'll get the message that way too.
Sherry, it's almost the start of May, and June doesn't seem like a lot of time to get this together.
Well, Jack, it's definitely a short period of time. The task force has been working over a year and a half now, and where they are now, I guess in the final stretch of what should be compiling their report, is a short period of time. I personally think they probably need to take more time to hear from residents and to continue this conversation. But unfortunately, what we also have to consider is the fact that where council is, what year this is a election year for the city of Detroit. So we're going to be having primaries in like August. Then our council is going on recess in August. Then you also have our election at the beginning of November. Then the council goes on recess again at the end of November through December. So there's going to be a lot of time throughout the rest of this year where council is unable to really work on this and give this the attention it needs in the public. Which I think will be a great idea for the task force to continue working, meeting with the public, gathering more information, because realistically, there's also the reality that they could be giving these recommendations to a very different council come November after the election. So I think this is one of those conversations that needs to be ongoing.
You're listening to The Metro, and we're talking to Detroit documenter Sherry Smith and coordinator Linnell Herndon. The Detroit Reparations Task Force has been meeting for about 2 years, and they're preparing a June report for City Council and seeking input from Detroit residents. Sherry, you spoke with Jason Larsosa, a member of the Detroit Reparations Task Force. Who is Jason?
So Jason Larsosa and I actually met almost 10 years ago. We were both working at another local Detroit nonprofit. And Jason is a dad. He's a community advocate. He has been working with racial justice advocacy and equity work for over 10 years. He is a devoted husband. He has some awesome daughters, 3 beautiful little girls, also known as the Hershey Kisses. So shout out to them. But Jason knows what some of the harms in the city of Detroit look like, whether that is criminalization because of drug incarcerations and just growing up in a very tough city. I think that he has a lot to bring to this task force based on his experience in community work and how a lot of the harms in this city impact day-to-day folks.
Larsosa wrote a 29-page report for the task force. Sherry, why did he take this on?
Okay, so I'm pretty sure he would want me to say he did not do this on his own. He worked with the committee that he sits on, a lot of work too with member Edith Ford. And so one of the reasons that when I asked why he put this on, he was saying that this was a compilation of a lot of the conversations and suggestions that they've been hearing from residents. And he wanted people to have something that they could visually see, kind of comprehend, throw at the wall, see how it landed, tear apart, his words, not mine, tear apart and, give that feedback and say, hey, whether good or bad, we like this, we don't like this, we feel like this works, so that sometimes it's good to have a frame to look at so you can say, I don't like the way this looks. Everybody can envision a lot of things, but once you put a thing to paper, once there's a thing you can tangibly hold and kind of compare to some things, you can do some pros and cons. I think this puts a little bit of meat on the bones of the conversation that people can look at and say, okay, here's a suggestion. And he definitely stressed to me that these were suggestions. These aren't necessarily, hey, we're going to council and saying this is what needs to happen. But these are some of the things they've heard and that they tried to kind of put together in an organized way for people to investigate, for people to look into, for people to say, hey, I've never heard of this before. Has anybody else done this? Let me look into it. What would this really look like? Ask more of those questions. Come up with suggestions that they feel like might be better suggestions, so that the task force and subsequently council and the rest of the residents can have these conversations and also weigh in on them. So I think the biggest thing was that he wanted to put this out prior to them completing their report to get more people talking about this, to get more people giving their feedback and their input on what is going on for reparations in the city of Detroit, because we discussed the fact that it's not a lot of people who know that this Detroit Task Force Reparations conversation is actually happening.
What were some of the things that Larsosa and the people who worked on this initial 29-page report highlighted?
So they highlighted a few things, lots of suggestions. One thing that they put together was a framework that has kind of a multi-layered approach, is the way they would put it. So a lot of us think about reparations in terms of individual reparations. You have people who are making suggestions about, write me a check or, give me a house or help me start my business. Those are on the individual level. But then you also have in the report, they talk about the micro level and the macro level that move outside of just the individual, right? So there's things like things addressing whether or not folks have access to loans and things to start their businesses, education, tax reductions, different things like, and even on there's one level they call the narrative level, I believe, where they talk about the story that has been told about Black Detroiters and making sure that Black Detroiters are able to see themselves, and there's a concerted effort to just portray Black Detroiters as they are, not just in the historical negative references. In Detroit, we play up a lot of our celebrities, a lot of our musicians, a lot of our artists, but also just the amount of power that Detroit has built in the Black community. A lot of the things that have been taken and stolen from the Black community, but wanting to portray those things that build up the Black community, that restore the identity of the powerful people that they are. And so restoring those narrative things as well. So one of the biggest things was this multi-layered approach, that in case there were people who may not, for whatever reason, qualify for the individual reparations, they would hopefully be caught, in the net of, going through the other levels. Now, again, none of this is set in stone. These were just some suggestions. And if folks have more suggestions to say, hey, you know what, I don't like that. I don't fit into any of those categories. Something else should be added in there. That's what it was put out for. It was designed to kind of start those conversations.
Lynell, one of the big conversations and questions around the Detroit Reparations Task Force is funding. Where could this money come from, and how could it be administered? Do we have any idea?
I mean, there's some ideas, but that's what kind of like what the whole point of asking the community is like, do y'all have ideas, right? That is the question. That's the question that's on the table right now. Where is this money coming from? Especially kind of considering a little bit of the political climate Sherry was just describing, like, and that we all kind of know about. Where is this money coming from? Right. And then that's part of the discussion too, when you think about narrowing it down to Detroit, just the city of Detroit. So it's like, what can Detroit do to repair the harm that Detroiters have experienced at the hands of Detroit? So you're looking at like the general fund, right? You're looking for this to be budgeted into the city's funds. And then as far as distribution, there's all types of ideas. I think Jason's document talked a little bit about what if it's distributed through nonprofits? What would that look like? And there are people that fall on different sides of that discussion as well. So that's why people are saying, like, we're throwing these ideas out there. What do you think? Weigh in, tap in, guys.
Linnell, the report is going to go to City Council in June. What could happen next, or what will happen next?
I mean, I can't tell you what's going to happen. I could tell you what I think is going to happen or what is likely to happen. But again, just back to what Sherry said. I mean, so back to a task force. Their job is to do research and to have these discussions and to put these ideas out there and to form like a comprehensive list of recommendations. That's what they do. That's all they can do. Then it's up to city council to go ahead and say, yeah, we want to implement this. No, we don't. And, Sherry just described like, is that conversation going to come to the floor of city council after June? We don't know. But if it does, it's most likely going to have to go to committee. They're going to have to analyze it, come up with their recommendations, say, yeah, we like this. We want to send this to the full council to discuss. The full council will probably hold a public hearing about it to hear more from residents about it. And so, there's a long way. There's a long way to go still.
Metro producer Jack Philbrandt spoke with Detroit documenter Sherry Smith and coordinator Linnell Herndon about the Detroit Reparations Task Force. The task force wants input from residents as they're preparing a June report for City Council. Anyone can contact the task force. The number is 313-542-5488. Coming up, the number of men going to and graduating from college is behind the number of women. Experts suggest the issue begins well before the application process. We'll talk to two people whose organizations are working with Detroit boys to change this. And we want to hear from you. Do you identify as a man? Why didn't you go to a traditional four-year university? And what have you heard as to why other men aren't going to college? The number is 313-577-1019. This is the Metro. Stay with us.